Hi, today I'm going to talk about Norway and the time that I moved and lived in Norway as part of the Erasmus student exchange program. So watch and listen. So I moved to Norway with the Erasmus student exchange program, which is an opportunity which was provided to students in my university to exchange with students from other universities across Europe. And I chose to go to Norway. I imagine students from Norway came and spent time in Scotland. I chose to go to Norway because I love the outdoors. I love to go hill walking or hiking in Scotland in the mountains. And Norway has famous scenery. The mountains are amazing and they've got these fjords as well. And I'd seen pictures of it before, but I'd never had the chance to go. And so when I got this chance, I took it because I wanted to go to Norway and to see the scenery for myself, which I did, which I'll talk about in a minute. The other reason was because I'd never been to a Scandinavian country before. I didn't know what to expect and it was just something different, but I didn't know what to expect. A good example of this is that before I went, I grew a big beard, down to about here. So I grew a big long beard because I was convinced that Norwegians were like Vikings and they would all be big and they'd have big beards. So I thought, I'm going to grow one myself so I can fit in a little bit better. And then when I went and I saw the locals, they were all really tall and skinny and clean shaven and they all had blonde hair. So I was the complete opposite. But I kept it anyway because I'd taken the time to grow it before. So I thought, I'll just keep it. So it got longer and it was horrible. And I wouldn't recommend growing a big beard, especially if you're going to Norway, because you'll stick out like a sore thumb. So this was the first time that I had actually lived abroad. And I remember being really, really, really excited and terrified, absolutely terrified about going. I remember shaking in the airport before, I don't want to go. But I learned so much. And I grew in confidence and I learned to speak out more and to be better at socialising. And I had such a great time. I really do recommend doing something like this if you have the opportunity to do it, to live abroad, to live in this sort of environment, like a social environment with a lot of young people who's similar age to you. It's such a good experience, great growing experience, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So I moved to a city called Bergen. Now Bergen is a very small city and it's actually very close to Scotland. I was convinced I could see Scotland from Bergen, but I don't think I could. But I moved to a student accommodation outside of Bergen. So Bergen is a small city that sits between two mountains, so it's kind of sandwiched between two mountains and it's on the coast. And there's one way in and one way out, and there's a tram line that runs up and down this valley, and several stops out is this student accommodation. The university is about halfway into the city from the student accommodation, and then you travel further into the city centre. So I lived out in the student accommodation and they moved me in, and I remember I was really scared. But when I went there, I met loads of people my age from all over Europe and further, because I think there was also international exchange students. It's a different program, similar but different. I was put into this group of young people from all over Europe and further. So there was people from Germany, Poland, France, Spain, England, Ireland, Finland, Australia, South America, all over. And we were all in this similar place. We were moved away from home. We didn't know anybody. We were scared of being by ourselves, by being lonely for the 4 months. It was a strange experience. We were put into this group of people we'd never met before, and suddenly we were like best friends. Obviously, over time, as we became more comfortable with our environment, we started to break up a little bit, break off. We realised maybe we didn't like them as much as we thought, or they didn't like us, but still, I did make some friends I'm still friends with today. So the student accommodation I moved to, I remember it just being terrible. Absolutely terrible. My room was tiny and all the walls were made of wood. They had like vertical wooden panels. So I felt like I was living in a sauna, except it was freezing cold. And I had this small tiny single bed with this really uncomfortable mattress. So it wasn't a great place to stay, but that didn't matter to me because and all the rooms surrounding me were all these other people I'd met from all over the world. It was really cool. So yeah, Bergen is a small city on the southwestern coast of Norway, and like I said, it sits in this valley. It's quite small. It's like a harbour town feel to it, and it's got these amazing wooden houses that line the harbour, and they're really old and they're really colourful, and they're really cool. I remember them really well. And the city itself has loads of great coffee shops. I spent a lot of money in Norwegian coffee. Yeah, it was expensive. I had a lot of pubs as well, and clubs and good restaurants, but I didn't go to restaurants very often because of the price. But I did go to the pubs and the clubs a lot, and it wasn't because they were cheap, they were also expensive. It's just because I think I prioritised that over food. Alcohol, food, alcohol. But Bergen was a nice place and had a really young feel to it as well. I think because I was there during term time, so there was a lot of students in the university and the town was just full of students. So it had this really vibrant feel to it. And same in the pubs and the clubs, there was a lot of young students there a lot from Norway and from other countries as well. But yeah, the prices, yeah, expensive. The food was very expensive, so we cooked in a lot. We cooked for ourselves. We made big banquets, and we all sat around these big tables and we ate together, which was really nice. But then we would go to the pubs and the clubs and spend all of our money. I do remember spending £10, the equivalent of £10 in Norwegian kroner for a beer. I'm thinking, what? £10? But it was a very fancy bottle of beer. It was a bottle as well. It wasn't a pint, it was a bottle. But it was a very fancy bottle of beer, and it was very strong as well. And yeah. But it was expensive. However, there was cheaper ways to get alcohol. So we got student discount in a lot of the pubs and the clubs. So the price with the student discount, the equivalent in pounds was £4. £4.50, which was okay. The beer wasn't very tasty, but it was okay. And also, we learned this off of the Norwegians, off of the local students. We learned that the cheapest way to get alcohol was to make your own alcohol. So that's what we did. Now, the Norwegian students, they had obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it and learning about this, and they were making their own beer, like strawberry beer, and it tasted so nice. But we didn't have the equipment or the money or the time or the knowledge, so we just made wine. And that's a lot easier to make. Not make well, but it's a lot easier to make. And what we did was that we just bought a big bucket and we filled it up with water, and then we bought a wine making kit, and it was full of all these different powders, which I didn't know what they were. But we just poured them into this bucket full of water, and then the whole thing, just mix it. And we were mixing it with a big like brush handle like that. And then we put it under my friend's bed, and it just started bubbling. Like, bub, bub, bub. And I believe that was it fermenting, becoming alcoholic. And it was cherry flavour, I think, so we had like a cherry flavouring we put in as well. But yeah, I remember my friend telling me that so he had this under his, first of all, his room was stinking. It was really smelly. It smelled like a brewery. But also he would wake up in the middle of the night so that from the noise of like a bubble popping, like a big pop would wake him up. And he'd go to sleep smiling because he knew that was the wine. It was nearly ready. And I remember trying it, and it was okay. Tasted fine. Tasted like cherry. And it was alcoholic. It actually did work. And it was okay. It was okay. And it was cheap. So that's what we did. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the university and then maybe about some of the places I went to Norway as well. I went to university because it was a student exchange program, so you obviously had to go to classes, and I studied engineering, so I had engineering classes to go to. And I remember it was me and a girl from Poland. We shared classes. We went to the same classes. And there was actually Norwegian taught classes, so they were full of Norwegian students, and they spoke amazing English. They all had American accents, I think because they watched a lot of American TV shows and movies growing up, so they had these American accents. It was very strange. And then there was the teachers, and they were a bit older, and they spoke English but not great, so they taught in Norwegian. And I remember me and my friend, we got English notes for the classes, but then the classes were taught in Norwegian. So I remember trying quite hard to read as it was taught, and it didn't go very well, and then I ended up skipping a few classes, which means I didn't go, but I still passed in the end. And then I also remember I went to a Norwegian language class with the other exchange students. Now, I don't speak Norwegian, not even close, but I do remember this class because all the exchange students found it really funny when I attempted to speak Norwegian because of my Scottish accent. And I don't know why, but I'm going to attempt to pronounce some Norwegian place names, so maybe you'll find out. So yes, university was fine, but I actually think the social aspect of this whole experience is just as important as the studying. So if you ever get to go on some sort of exchange program or something similar, go to your class and study is great, but also really make an effort to enjoy yourself and to meet people and to learn about the culture of a place. I think that's just as important as the studying, in my opinion. So yes, so some of the places I went to Norway, like I said, I was really interested in the scenery and seeing some of the country. So one of the first places I went was with the other exchange students. We went to a town called Kinsarvik, and this sits on a fjord which is called Sjordfjorden. So we went to this town and then we stayed in cabins, in wooden cabins, and we went kayaking on the fjord. And then first thing in the morning, really early, we ran into the fjord and we went swimming, and it was freezing cold, but that was great. It was really good fun. And then another time we travelled out of Bergen for a hike. So we travelled for about 2 hours. We were driving along these roads, and then you would go through tunnels through the mountains, and the tunnels are huge. They were blasted with dynamite. That's how they make them, and they're so cool. They're amazing, and they were so big that you would actually travel through the tunnel, through the mountain, and then there would be a roundabout inside the mountain, and say like 3 or 4 tunnels would shoot off in different directions. Yeah, crazy. But so yeah, we travelled out for about 2 to 3 hours outside of Bergen, and we went for a hike, an all-day hike, and we walked up a mountain for about 3 or 4 hours. And then when we got to the top, there was this rock which juts out of a cliff face. This rock is called Trolltunga, which is named after a troll's tongue, like a troll's tongue. And this is quite a famous place which a lot of tourists go to, because you can walk out onto the end of the rock and there's nothing underneath the rock. It's about 700 metres above Lake Ringedalsvatnet, about 700 metres above this lake, and you can walk out on the end and get your picture taken. And some people even sit on the end of this rock. And I didn't go on the rock. I'm terrified of heights. Well, not anymore, but I was terrified of heights. Now I'm just scared. But I didn't go on the rock. I just looked at it from a safe distance. Another place I went to was a city called Trondheim, which is north of Bergen. Now, I remember 2 things about Trondheim. First of all, I travelled there with my friends in December, so close to Christmas. And so the whole city, very small city, but the whole city felt like a big Christmas market, with all the stalls and everything, and there was snowing. And then the second thing was I saw the one and only Scottish pub. Usually you see Irish pubs in different countries, but there was a Scottish pub, which is quite strange for me to see. I decided I'd go to the Scottish pub and I'd order a beer with my Scottish accent, and I'll see if the person behind the bar recognises the accent and said anything. And they didn't. They just gave me a beer. Oh well. And the final place I went to was actually in Bergen, but just on the north side of Bergen, I think. And it was a hike up the mountain, and this was called Stotsekliven. And so the hike was about 720 steps, I think, and it was really, really steep. A really steep climb up the mountainside. And people walk up there. They walk up the steps, which is nice, but you can actually run up the steps. There's actually a race every single year up the Stotsekliven, and it's nicknamed the steepest race in the world. I think the grade is about 30 degrees, like that, all the way up. And we ran up several times, and oh my god, it was so difficult. I do remember, I finished it, and then my legs just gave way and I fell over, and I couldn't move. So it was worth it, because at the very top you got an amazing view of the city of Bergen, and you could see all the way down the valley towards my accommodation in the university, and you could see the mountainside on the other side of the city, and then you could see out to the sea, and I was convinced that I could see Scotland. I don't know if it was Scotland, maybe I just missed it at the time, but I was convinced I could see my home. So yes, that is a little bit about my experience in Norway when I moved there as part of the Erasmus program, and I had the time of my life. I would recommend this type of experience for anybody, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about it in the future. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.